Laura stared at the hero in front of her, at this person who had grown to become a pillar of Japanese society, someone who most people in this country and school she went to admired. And rather than meeting this woman with a smile like most people her age would, especially people in this country, she found herself snarling. Yeah, kid, it has to be now. That was what this woman had said to her. Laura barely liked talking to most people. There had maybe been a handful of exceptions, and while her father was one of them, one of her father's colleagues wasn't. But she could tell from the intense look in this lady's eyes that she wasn't going to let this go anytime soon. Fine, what do you want? Laura asked with all the bluntness of a hammer. She thought she saw the rabbit hero flinch for a second, but she thought better of it. Mirko definitely didn't have the reputation for it anyway. But, to her surprise, after she said those words, the rabbit hero was silent. You're the one who said you wanted to do this, you know, she continued. Mirko looked around. While most of the students around her were still preparing to watch their next match, there were still some who had drawn their eyes to this scene. She laughed to herself. The last time that she was in a near-death scenario, she was laughing hysterically. She was smiling from ear to ear. This, compared to that, wasn't even close to the same level of stress, but she still found herself unable to continue in such a public setting. Privately, she said, staring down at Laura. You've gotta be kidding me, Laura said, her eye twitching. Do I look like I'm kidding? Mirko replied, hardening her eyes. Laura stared at her for a moment before sighing deeply. Screw it, she responded. At the very least, it would take her mind off of her match would be happening sooner or later. Probably sooner. The idea of fighting the other students wasn't exactly appealing to her, especially since she had to make sure she didn't hurt any of them, so fine. Whatever this conversation was, it was probably going to be less painful. She followed Mirko until she led her to a hallway, Logan watching the two of them disappear behind the doors. Yeah, this definitely isn't going to end well, Logan muttered to himself, focusing on the screen ahead, at the next match coming to fruition. All in all, their walk only lasted a few minutes. From Laura's point of view anyway. From Mirko's, it was technically around the same length of time, but it felt much longer. She finally turned around and faced Laura again. No matter how she might have been feeling in the moment, she refused to back down. She was Mirko, and she didn't run from anything. So, she opened her mouth.
Alright, let's get ready for round 2.
All Might's voice boomed out.
The hero team of Riri Williams and Momo Yaoyorozu versus the villain team of Tsuyu Asui and Fumikage Tokoyami.
His voice continued out into the ether.
You've had your chances to get ready. Now, it's time for you to begin.
Izuku stared up at the screen as he walked in from the outdoors. So, how'd the talk go? Toph asked, having seen Izuku coming out from at least a couple hundred feet before anybody else. She could feel him shaking, just slightly, through the ground. She could feel him breathing in and out, just a bit heavier than he normally did. From that, she could pretty easily tell that he was rattled, which was something that hadn't happened between him and the blonde for quite some time. Oh, it was fine, Izuku sighed. You know I can tell when you lie, right? Toph said, tapping the ground with her foot. Izuku groaned. Okay, it was weird, okay? He replied, a bit more curt than he usually was. Sorry, he muttered. It's okay, crybaby, Toph said back. Why don't you start from the beginning? What, like in the middle of a match? Izuku asked. What, you can't talk and watch at the same time? Toph asked. I'm being nice here. You might want to take advantage of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity I'm offering you. She nudged him with her elbow. Yeah, okay. Izuku managed to chuckle out. I caught up to him and... Riri and Momo walked out to the edges of the building, staring up at it. In that moment, Riri's mind was racing. One of the benefits of seeing a match before hers was that at the very least she knew the layout of the place. The building itself had no surprises for her. In fact, she had programmed what she had seen into her suit, giving her an almost X-ray-like vision of the building, letting her see through walls, of everything that she knew was there at least. It didn't really help her when it came to her opponents. Where they were was still a complete and utter mystery. Though unfortunately, it wasn't as comforting as she hoped. She really had no idea where anything important was. Maybe they had even moved the bomb. Clearly the most efficient route is to go straight to the top, Riri said. But if they're both waiting up there, things are gonna get messy really fast. Not to mention the potential damage it could do to the building, Momo added on. If this is meant to simulate a real-life situation, then preferably as little property damage as possible should be done. And at the same time, we probably shouldn't divide and conquer, Riri replied. They watched the last match like we did, so I doubt they didn't take any lessons from it. Bakugo storming off on his own was one of the things that led to the other team's loss, after all. True, Momo groaned. Man, this is going to be a lot more complicated than I thought. Maybe not, Riri voiced. All they needed was to find a way inside. To find a way inside and make sure they didn't get overwhelmed when they did. Her mind got to work on solving both. Tokoyami's power is useless in the light, right? I wouldn't say useless, but it's definitely weaker, Momo replied. I can work with that. Hey, you have to know the chemical composition of something in order to make it, right? Riri asked, Momo nodding her head in response. Okay, Riri muttered. A light shone from her suit, projecting it onto the ground. Momo looked at it, furrowing her brow. What exactly is that? She asked. It's the chemical composition of a flashbang, Riri said back. Momo's eyes widened in response. You just had that in your head? Momo asked, half stupefied. This kid really was Tony Stark's child, adopted or not. Well, you can never be too prepared, right? That's what Tony always says anyway. He laughed through the metal mask in her suit. Right, Momo responded, making a mental note to schedule a tutoring session with Riri later. It would definitely improve her abilities to use her powers, at least. Not to mention the fact that she had an idea would just be fascinating. But that was a problem for after they won this. Okay, but what about Asui? Momo asked, Riri pausing in response. Riri didn't know the full extent of that girl's powers. It would be easy to underestimate someone whose ability was to have frog-like attributes, but considering one of the most powerful heroes in the world was Spider-Man, she thought better of it. At the very least, she probably had enhanced abilities. Probably enhanced agility, definitely enhanced strength. Momo pondered to herself. She had also taken note of Asui's powers. The biggest threat she foresaw was that she was incredibly acrobatic. She could easily use her powers to jump around the building, easily getting outside of their eye line within seconds. If they were smart about this, it would take them a while to even find her. And once they found her, their biggest issue would be keeping her in place, making sure that she didn't get out of their grip as soon as she could. Momo thought to herself, Hey, Riri, I think I might have an idea, Momo said, leaning into the other girl's ear and whispering her plans. As the short amount of time pushed past the two of them, Riri found herself nodding repeatedly. Dang, you really are smart, Riri replied with a grin on her face. Things were actually beginning to look up. Of course, Momo's plan relied on them being able to act very quickly the second they were within range of the others, meaning that they would have to surprise them, get the jump on them quickly and efficiently. And unfortunately, Riri's suit wasn't the best at flying right now. If they wanted to use it to get to the top, it would be like shooting themselves out of a missile. They'd get to the top, but they wouldn't be able to stop. Of course, that might not be a problem if there was something to lessen the impact. Riri thought. How much of something can you make at one time? Riri asked. Momo lifted an eyebrow in response. Fumikage Tokoyami waited patiently, cross-legged on the floor. They were taking their time, and he didn't like that. Both of his opponents were easily formidable, both in terms of their versatility, which Aizawa had made very clear was extremely important in the world of heroes, and in terms of their physical strength. This location was suitably dark enough for Dark Shadow to work properly, and they had made a good effort to block out all the lights. But, even if the lights were completely blocked out, he wasn't sure if he could take a disciple of Iron Man in a one-on-one fight, not to mention the fact that he might lose control of Dark Shadow at any moment. And if that happened, all bets were off. He needed to be in complete control, and that meant sticking to the plan. Even if the plan made him so antsy he could barely sit still. I'm getting bored. Tokoyami felt his power echo from the darkness. He clutched a hand to his sleeve. Of course it was getting antsy. He forced himself to take a deep breath. You'll get your action, Shadow. It's only a matter of time, he responded stoically. He didn't know just how true those words would be. He heard an explosion from what had to be the outside. He barely even had time to process it before an even bigger one rung in his ears. One accompanied by the wall in front of him collapsing, light pouring in from the outside. The only shadow cast from the new hole in the wall was the smoldering form of Riri Williams, who skidded to a halt. Her rapid impact was slowed to a halt by some kind of strange yellow foam that erupted around her. That foam likely absorbed the impact, and was the only thing keeping the whole floor from plummeting to the ground in the same instant. From how fast the girl must have been moving, it should have collapsed nearly everything around them. There was no way she could be carrying that much foam in her suit, so if he had to guess, it was her partner. And he was proven right almost immediately. The form of Momo Yaoyorozu pulled herself up from a giant pile of gum, with a loosely armored suit hanging around her body. A suit that, if he had to guess, helped her survive the impact unscathed. It was something Riri recommended that she make, down to the chemical composition. It was definitely useful right now. She was about to walk away from a serious impact without a scratch, but it wasn't exactly designed for long-term fighting. It was heavily dented and basically non-usable after the impact. A one-attack crash suit. An interesting thing to come up with on the fly. She released herself from the suit, pulling herself up with all the force she could muster. They needed to move quickly before Tokoyami activated Dark Shadow. Once that happened, things were going to get a whole lot messier, but she needed to wait for the signal. Riri raised both of her hands in the air, almost looking like she was surrendering before the fight had even begun. Tokoyami's eyes narrowed. Dark Shadow. He called for the creature tied to him, as it launched itself towards the girl. Before it could reach her, though, Riri smiled underneath her mask. She turned to Momo. Signal, she said, the word echoing out through the room, through the speakers on her suit. The repulsor blasters on her gauntlet's palms glowed, lighting up the area directly around the two of them in a bubble so bright it could be mistaken for a star on Earth. That's the signal, all right, Momo said to herself, focusing with all her might. Two guns that looked like grenade launchers poured themselves out of her back. Tokoyami staggered backwards as he looked at them. They weren't planning to go that destructive, were they? If anything, they looked especially disappointed with Bakugo when he tried to. Momo raised both weapons, to Tokoyami's surprise, not at him. Rather, she was aiming around him, to every single corner of the room. Directly beside him, directly in front of him, directly behind him. He braced for an impact, but to his surprise, none came. He opened his eyes just barely to see what was going on, and that's when he saw it. They weren't regular grenades. In a single moment, he was washed over in a wave of light, as was, nearly, the entire room. So, he just dropped it and walked away? Are you sure you're thinking of the right Bakugo? Toph asked, waiting for Izuku's response. She found herself waiting longer than she initially expected. Hey, Crybaby, you okay? There's something on the screen, Izuku responded. Now that Toph noticed, most of the class was extremely quiet. Something big must have been going on, so she focused herself. She tried to feel the vibrations in the building before her, but she still felt like she was missing something. Dang, that's an effective strategy, Melissa swallowed hard, thankful that those two weren't her opponents. That would have ended very badly very quickly, even quicker than it was probably going to end here. Ouch, Ochako remarked. Ida had put her through the ringer up there, but thankfully she missed the majority of painful moments in her match. Izuku and Bakugo had that fun. She was able to see that in the recordings after the match. She could feel sweat pooling on her face just staring at this. It didn't really sink into her just how lucky she was before. That's a hell of a lot of power, Kaminari said. Not sure I could create a light that bright with just my sparks. I feel like I'm being blinded just looking at that thing, Danielle responded. She was wincing, staring at the pure white of the screen. It was burning her corneas. And since that guy's power only works in darkness... Man, I kind of feel bad. That's almost not fair. Nobody fights fair, kid, Logan responded. He narrowed his eyes. The opponents had just been sitting there waiting for the other two to show up. So, either they were the world's worst strategists, or this wasn't the end of the fight just yet. Either way, good opening gambit. He almost wished Laura was there to see it. She usually got a kick out of when people were clever, but in the moment, he was more just relieved. Relieved that he wasn't having to be in the same room as that conversation. Excuse me? Laura replied. She had registered that the others outside had stopped talking. Likely it meant something big had just happened in the match. But at the moment, her mind couldn't be bothered to care. Not when she was busy deciding to give a death glare or just run out of the room as quickly as possible. I said, I'm dating your old man, Mirko replied, wanting to bite her tongue at the moment. Laura's excuse me was the perfect chance to rephrase herself, to make the moment just a little bit softer. Instead, she went at it with just the same enthusiasm that she had before. And she was getting the feeling that, right now, that probably wasn't the best idea. But she had already said it, and there was no way forward but forward. And I've been for a while now, longer than it normally takes for stuff to get serious for me. It took me a while to get the fun side out of him, you know? He said, trying for a joke. And how long is a while? Laura asked with the inflection of a CIA interrogator. About a year? Mirko cleared her throat. She reached a hand out to Laura. She had done this a number of times as a hero. Reaching a hand out to somebody with complete understanding of their emotional state, letting them know that no matter what, she was there, and that things were going to be okay. In her mind, it was probably the most important time that she had made that move. Look, I can't say that I know what you're feeling right now, because I don't, and that's fine, because I want to. I want to know all the crazy things going on in your head, all the stuff that makes you, you know, you. You're important to Logan, so you're important to me, you know? He said. Laura stared at the hand, looked at it like it was covered in tar or some kind of spikes. Is that everything you wanted to tell me? She asked. Huh? Mirko said. Is that everything you wanted to tell me? Laura said again. Yeah, it is, Mirko replied. On that note, Laura, without missing a beat, turned away from Mirko's still outstretched hand and walked back into the room. Things were going even smoother than Riri expected. With the flashbangs going off, not only did Tokoyami not have a way of using Dark Shadow, he barely had any way of seeing the two of them before him maneuver. So, when Riri launched herself towards Tokoyami, she hadn't been expecting any resistance. And for the most part, she was right. She had to dodge a couple of attacks from Dark Shadow here or there, but they were a lot weaker than she expected. It wasn't completely disabled, but it was so weak it was like a kid was trying to bang against her armor. She managed to catch up to Tokoyami, entrapping him in a tape-like substance that Momo had made. In essence, she had taken him out of the fight, at least she hoped. Momo, meanwhile, had begun breaking off toward the bomb itself, running off at a full sprint while keeping her head on a swivel for Asui. So, it was completely to her surprise that she hadn't seen the girl. She was nowhere to be found in the complete illumination of the area. It was strange. Even Riri found it strange. Had Asui gone to a lower level? Maybe they had made the same mistake that Bakugo made after all. Maybe they had split up. That was when a thought struck her. Something Tony had said when she asked him why people always seemed to be surprised when he showed up. It always seemed strange to her. They should have seen him coming from a mile away, especially in his armor. He looked at her in that moment and smiled. Kid, even in a world of heroes, you'd be surprised how often people forget to look up. In that moment, she did. Oh crap, Momo, stop! Riri shouted through her mask. It was a bit too late though. Momo's eyes drifted upwards toward where Riri was staring, just in time to see Asui's shadow jump down at her from the top of the missile, directly on top of her. Asui's foot slammed directly on top of Momo. She recoiled under the girl's full weight. It wasn't even that much, but from that high up it sure felt like a lot. Momo reeled back. Her body fell backwards, her face slamming onto the ground below. Sorry, Asui said, hopping off of Momo, who groaned in response. But I can't let you get any further. Yeah, I get it, Momo responded, her head spinning so heavily that she could practically see cartoon burns circling over it. They had Asui to the side as a surprise plan B in case Tokoyami went down. She hated that she didn't see that coming. Riri pushed herself forward with all the force that her repulsors could grant her, at least all the force that they could grant her without her tipping over and falling through a wall, and she was barreling straight toward Asui. The girl prepared. She half expected Riri to go straight for the bomb, but she was going straight for her teammate instead. Definitely heroic behavior, she admitted. But it was still a bad plan. It just meant that she had one more chance to... Come to think of it, Riri was moving pretty fast, and Asui had seen videos of Iron Man at full speed smashing through steel walls. She steadied herself. A bit of sweat poured down her face. It was fine. Nobody in this game was actually going to try to hurt the other team. The image of Bakugo's great explosion echoed through her mind. She shook herself off. She wasn't going to let this get to her. She flinched as Riri came up to her, only to see Riri going surprisingly a different direction. She went over her head, completely ignoring both her and Momo. She was going for the bomb. Asui tried to jump after Riri, only for her feet not to leave the ground. She looked down, just in time to see Momo's hand around her ankle, coated in some kind of adhesive substance, like glue. She glued her foot to the ground. Sorry, I couldn't let you get any farther, Momo replied, with a grin on her face as she watched Asui's stunned expression. At least what she thought was her stunned expression. Her vision was still a little off from the kick. Suddenly, every rescue plan, every battle strategy that Tsuyu and her team had concocted, they were all out the window. She couldn't do any of them if she couldn't move. In a last-ditch effort, she extended her tongue toward Tokoyami, using it like a whip to snap open a bit of the tape that had been wrapped around him. It freed him just enough to get to darkness, to extend his dark shadow, to try and stop Riri. But by the time it had reached her foot...
Game over! Looks like the hero team wins!
All Might's voice echoed through the area. Through the speakers, it sunk in the team, one by one. Tokoyami gritted his teeth. He couldn't even show the full extent of his power. He thought they would use light, but to be this thorough. There were barely any points in here that Dark Shadow could work properly. Asui just found herself blinking. Aizawa really was onto something, wasn't he? He was pretty sure that their power would give him more of a shot than this, but they had planned way too well. Can you unglue my leg now, please? Asui said, staring down at Momo. Oh, hey, sorry, Asui, Momo said, releasing a solvent from her palm. Tsuyu Asui jerked her leg up from the position it had been stuck to, before lowering a hand down to Momo to help her up. Kamisu, he responded, almost immediately. The four of them walked out of the area side by side, the students below them staring in silence as they came their way. That moment of silence only lasted briefly, before a wave of comments flooded them. The same wave of comments that flooded toward Izuku when his match was done, only now, Izuku was part of the people giving them. That was really clever, knowing that Tokoyami was the strongest between the two of them and deciding to take away his powers by shutting off darkness. You also made plans in case Asui wanted to get involved in the fight, and you knew that her main mode of strength was her mobility. You must have figured out that whole adhesive plan before you even walked into the room. Izuku stopped as Top elbowed him in the gut with her elbow. Oh, right, yeah, Izuku scratched the back of his head. The other team was pretty impressive too, Danielle said, smiling. That backup plan of yours almost turned things around. I wouldn't go that far, Tsuyu responded. Agreed. It was plain to say that we were outmatched. Tokoyami agreed. I'm really starting to think you guys don't learn all that much, Logan responded, crossing his arms. It was at this point that he noticed out of the corner of his eye, Mirko and Laura coming back into the room. There's no such thing as being outmatched, not in the real world anyway. That's why you gotta be thinking in 3 dimensions. Here, new question for class this time. How could Tokoyami and Asui have won? The class was silent for a moment before Izuku responded. Well, because they knew that the others were coming, they could have hid Tokoyami away. His main weakness is light, so he needs to be in a place where light's unlikely to reach. A place that light couldn't reach even if a wall were to break down and let more light in. I'd say maybe put him underneath the bomb itself, something the heroes couldn't mess with too much, but I'm not sure if they'd be able to move it without it going off, Izuku pondered. Given that Asui had almost taken Yaoyorozu out of the fight so quickly, I'd say she needed to move around the second she knocked Momo to the ground instead of waiting. If she stayed out of sight longer, she could have potentially helped deal with Williams or at least free Tokoyami. And if she did manage to free Tokoyami, then that would mean that they would be able to fight her together. And with the two of them combined, they could potentially break down Riri's armor, Izuku wondered. All Might blinked at his two proteges. Between this and what Yaoyorozu had done last time, there was practically no chance he was going to get a word in edgewise to drop any kind of wisdom. He felt his shoulders slump in the moment. Excellent job, you two, he said, trying to keep his voice as epic as possible in the moment. He still had to seem impressive, even if he didn't feel impressive right now. Yeah, real A+ work, Logan responded, now looking behind him to the two people who seemed to be refusing to look at each other. Yeah, he was really worried that wasn't going to end well. Gotta say, you all did good. Keep thinking like that and you might actually end up thriving in the hero world. I wouldn't pump up their egos that much, Aizawa responded. It's easy to come up with strategies after a fight. The fact that they lost this fight shows they couldn't do it beforehand, Aizawa said, staring down at the two who lost. You don't get partial credit for losing a fight in the real world. The class stiffened at his harshness, but to his surprise, neither of the two that he was looking at seemed all that concerned about it. Tokoyami seemed to be thinking the same thing already, so hearing it echoed out to him wasn't really doing all that much. And Tsuyu? She just seemed odd. Interesting, Aizawa noted to himself. If anything else, this was an impressive attitude. Alright, you four, please go get cleaned up. And, take Miss Yaoyorozu to go see the nurse, he said, watching Momo still hold her head. He made a mental note to himself that they should teach the class how to properly take a hit without getting too hurt. And you four, said, pointing at Aoyama, Ashido, Shoji, and Shiro. You're next. Report to your stations. Your fight starts in 5 minutes. The four nodded to the teacher, disappearing behind the wall that separated the viewing area from the battlegrounds. Meanwhile, Top tugged at Izuku's shoulder, pulling him to the side. Strangely enough, at the same point, Mirko had done virtually the same thing to Logan. Ah, wonder what that's about, Hiroshima asked. Who knows, Laura responded. She knew full well that she was probably the only one who knew, at least for one of those two groups. In the meantime, Melissa sat down on the ground, in a corner away from the room, currently scratching at her head, doing her best to take in deep breaths, in and out, as slowly as she could. Match was coming up soon. She was right after these guys. She'd be fighting Todoroki. Yeah, she wasn't thrilled about fighting Kirishima either. His durability was incredible, but Todoroki scared her. She wasn't remotely thrilled about the idea. His ice powers meant that even a wave of his hand could take her out of the fight completely. That was, unless she completely wanted to total her body using 100% of One For All. Her gauntlet might have given her a fighting chance, but this was the first time she was even testing it properly. She didn't know if the thing worked, and even if it worked perfectly, it would only allow her to throw punches at full strength. The rest of her body would still be stuck at 5% of One For All. As she thought about it, she was slowly becoming more and more sure of just how screwed she really was. She really wanted to be ready for this. She really needed to be ready for this. Wasn't sitting in well. As she pondered to herself, she stiffened suddenly when she realized All Might was sitting next to her. And even weirder, he wasn't buffed up. He was in its small form. What are you doing? Are you crazy? She asked, goosebumps pushing up and down her spine as she swung her head around.
Relax, kid. You sat pretty far away from everybody,
He said, Melissa looking up at him. It sunk into her that she really had moved a really far distance away from the main crowd. She wasn't expecting to. She really must have been up in her mind. She guessed she just needed to burn energy off, and thanks to All Might's training, she had a lot more energy these days to burn off.
And I needed a break, to be honest. Being big all the time is really exhausting now,
He said, smiling. Oh, yeah, right, he responded. Now she was feeling guilty for freaking out. The power was eventually going to leave him. He left it to her. She didn't have the right to be freaking out like this. But that thought was just making her freak out even more. What was she going to...
This is your first real fight, right? Outside of a sparring match, I mean?
He said, nudging her.
You nervous?
What? Nervous? No, I'm not nervous. Of course I'm not nervous. She responded quickly, sweat pouring down her face, betraying her emotions very quickly.
You're not fooling anybody, kid. Especially not me. I've known you for a while, you know.
He replied. Right. Yeah, of course. Sorry, Uncle Might. She slumped her shoulders.
Sorry for what?
All Might asked, glancing at her directly. I'm kind of shaking right now, to be honest, she said. I pictured this moment for a long time, you know. First time testing myself as a hero. Even before I had your quirk, but... He gripped her arm.
There's a difference between picturing it and facing it down?
All Might asked. It's a lot scarier than I thought it would be. I feel my heart pumping against my chest like it's trying to escape or something, Melissa said. I know it's stupid. I mean, this isn't even dangerous. It's just a test, but I'm still scared, I think. To her surprise, All Might seemed to smile. It was the same kind of grin that she had seen on the news time and time again. The kind of smile that said everything was going to be okay.
If you weren't nervous, I think I'd be scared for you,
he said, placing a fist over his heart.
You're scared because you know what this represents. You know that someday you'll be doing this full time. For real. And you're scared that if somehow you fail this, it means you'll be a bad hero. I, believe it or not, felt the same way back in the day.
You did? Melissa asked.
Of course I did. Do you think you're the only kid this happened to?
He asked.
Most of the people out there feel the same way, even the ones who are excited out of their minds. It just comes with the territory of putting on the cape. Doesn't mean you're bad heroes, it just means that you know what's at stake. No hero goes into a situation without being terrified. Not even Superman. And trust me, I've met him.
All Might cracked a small grin. Melissa felt herself smile a bit too. She really was privileged at the moment. The greatest hero in Japan was giving her a pep talk. She gave the man a bear hug, and he hugged her back. She was going to do her best to make him proud. She was going to do her best to show him that she was worthy of the gift that he gave her. So, what are you going to do about it? Pop asked Izuku. About what? Izuku asked. Dynamite boy, she said, not missing a beat. I know you're still thinking about it. We've known each other way too long for you to hide that. And your lie detector thing really is cheating sometimes. But to answer your question, I don't really know. Izuku scratched his cheek. I mean, since when does he just let things go? I've never seen him do it before. Feels off. Hawk nodded. There really wasn't much Izuku could do in the moment about Bakugo, that was true. He told the guy the truth, and he still half flew off the handle. If he actually accepted the truth, then who knew what he was gonna do? It was like trying to predict a tornado that hadn't even formed yet. But that's not all you're worried about, is it? Toph asked, crossing her arms. Izuku flinched, wondering for a moment how she managed to do that, before again, the answer fled back to him. That thing really isn't fair, he said. Her reading his emotions through the floor really felt like cheating now. Plays fair. Fair's for losers. Now talk, Toph responded. It's just that he said something before he walked away, he said. That on the surface didn't surprise Toph. He was the kind of guy to throw a tantrum if he didn't like something. It was about my powers. Toph cocked an eyebrow. He said I definitely wasn't a mutant. Oh, Is that it? Toph asked. To be perfectly honest, she had already kind of figured that out. Most mutants knew what their powers were by the time they turned 5 or 6. It was pretty much a rule of nature. There were very few exceptions to it. I know it's stupid that I haven't thought about it before, but I just haven't. I mean, he said I could be a metahuman like the Flash, but those guys are exposed to something that triggers their power, right? I don't think I was. And like, sure, I could be a mutate or something like the Hulk, but what was I mutated by? I got angry and then my powers just kind of showed up out of nowhere. It doesn't make any sense to me. I was so freaked out that I even had powers in the first place that I never stopped to consider how I got them. He sighed, slumping himself against a wall. I don't know. I mean, I didn't even want these things in the first place. I trained for years to be a hero without powers, and then they just kind of popped up and ruined all that. That's fine. I guess I've made my peace with it. He said, his face twisting in a way that showed he definitely had made his peace with it. But what if they come from somewhere dangerous? What if they're doing something to me? Is there any way for me to even find out? Toph paused for a moment. Yeah, it definitely is a mystery. So, what are you gonna do about it? He asked. Can you even do anything about it? Izuku paused. The scene was months since having been cleaned up and cleared, and the sludge villain was in a prison he could probably never enter, so there was no recourse there. He had no witnesses, no materials to work with. There was no starting point for any investigation. No, said, slumping his shoulders. I don't think I can do anything. Not yet, at least, Toph said, placing a hand on his shoulder. For now, just don't worry about it. You got powers, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, and overthinking it is going to drive you crazy. But the second you do have some kind of recourse, and you can look into it, the second you can actually go poking around, come find me. He smiled. And we'll go get into trouble together. Sound like a plan? Izuku smiled. Yeah, I guess that sounds like a plan. You just walked away? Logan asked. He wasn't expecting good news. In fact, he was expecting anything but. But from the sound of it, it looked like things had gotten even worse than he thought. Laura was still new to most things. He was the only real constant in her life. The only real constant who wasn't absolutely terrible anyway. But he was always scared of this possibility, but still. Yeah, just turned on her heels and everything, Mirko said back, sitting against the wall. She half thought that Logan was exaggerating on the chances of things spiraling so quickly. Now she thought better of it, which was unfortunate. The least of which being that if Logan wanted to, he could definitely hold this above her head. In this situation, he was unequivocally right, and she was unequivocally wrong. And that sucked. And she did not seem happy. Well, shit. Logan rubbed his brows. It wasn't the first time being a father, but he still didn't have much experience with it. At least not much experience seriously committing to it. All of this, was new to him, and he didn't have much idea what to do next. We should probably just give her some space, let the whole thing sink in. A moment of silence passed between them. Nah, to hell with that, Mirko responded. The stoic expression she was wearing grew into a much bigger smile. Uh-oh, Logan muttered aloud. Don't uh-oh me, Logan, she pointed at him. All this proved is that I need to go about things a bit differently. But trust me, sooner or later, that kid is gonna love me. Rumi, Logan began. Love me, he repeated, walking out of the room. Great, she already made up her mind. That was fantastic. Laura had enough trouble making regular friends. She probably wasn't gonna change her mind very soon. And this was all probably gonna get worse. I gotta talk to her, don't I? Logan realized. He laughed to himself in the moment. Over the years, the Wolverine had fought vampires, he had fought would-be invaders, he had fought planet invaders. But this moment, talking to a kid who had been tortured just like he was, a kid who had barely gotten used to the outside world, and who was raised from birth to be a killing machine, by the same organization that tortured him, into giving his girlfriend a chance? Or at least not killing her if she wanted to talk. It was so strange to him. It felt weird. Honestly, it felt kind of funny. Who knew mundane problems would be so much worse? Alright, villain team. Congratulations. You won this round. The voice of Shoto Aizawa rang through the speakers. In that moment, Logan realized something that the other groups did. It was time to get back to work. Everyone who left the room came back at roughly the same time. The last group to arrive being Momo and Riri, who had just come from the nurse's office. Momo thought that getting hurt was going to be the worst aspect of her day, but getting a giant lecture from Recovery Girl certainly didn't help her mood. I still think that the long rest period was unnecessary, Momo replied. The duo had completely missed the fight because of it. That added yet another wound to a list of long-growing ones. You could barely walk straight when you came in, you know. You can see why she'd be cautious, Riri said back. Especially after that long talk about how many people she's seen injured. That talk was kinda long, wasn't it? Momo said, slumped over. Hey, she's gotta talk people out of being reckless somehow, Riri replied. Oh, I was being reckless? He replied. Was I the girl who launched us into a building like a missile? It worked, didn't it? Riri smiled back. She didn't have much time to ponder the fact that, right now, she was actually making friends. She was just having fun, with nothing tied to it. And honestly, neither did Momo, because things progressed pretty quickly afterwards. Alright, time for the next match, Hero Team, All Might said, pointing towards Shoto Todoroki and Ejiro Kirishima. It's time for you to get to your stations. Of course, the same goes for the Hero Team, he said, gesturing toward Danielle Cage and Melissa Shield. Get ready, all of you. It's time to go beyond. He raised his fist in the air with his words. You ready? I'm not gonna go easy on ya, Kirishima said, crossing his arms in front of Danielle. I hope you're not. That's a good way to get your back broken, Danielle responded back. Kirishima hardened the skin on his hand, putting it up for a fist bump, which Danielle returned. A loud clunking sound echoed from where their fists met as they did. Kirishima bared his teeth in an incredible smile. He had a feeling this was going to be one hell of a fight. May the best man win, Kirishima puffed his chest up. Oh, don't worry. We will, Danielle said, disappearing behind the wall with Melissa. On top of the tower next to the bomb, the two girls sat side by side, one of them a lot calmer than the other. I can't believe we're the villains, Danielle said, stretching her back. Of every possibility I saw for myself, this definitely wasn't one of my future career plans. My folks would have a cow. I'm glad you're taking this so lightly, Melissa responded, smiling nervously. Relax, we'll both be fine, Danielle said, putting a hand on the girl's shoulder. She could tell upon contact with Melissa that she was still a little nervous. She was definitely shaking. If only slightly. Would it make you feel better if we had a plan? She asked. Well, what did you have in mind? Melissa responded. Huh. Well, it looks like they have two heavy hitters on their side, Danielle muttered. Between the son of the #2 hero in Japan and somebody with a very similar power set to my own, things are looking pretty interesting. She pondered. Either one of them could try the tactic of just storming in here, and she didn't know how strong either of them were, which was definitely a problem. It would be pretty bad to take on both of them at the same time, Melissa said. She was half talking to herself. She didn't know how many punches her new gauntlet could take. Getting into a prolonged conflict wasn't the best idea. But at the same time, most people were going to be pretty hesitant to split up, especially people on the hero side of things. They were going into a situation where they didn't have the home field advantage, and strength in numbers was a very important tactic. Well, I don't think we have much of a choice there, unless... Danielle stroked her chin. Unless what? Melissa asked. Unless we split up, Danielle said, crossing her arms. One of us goes down there to deal with M, and the other... Stays up here with the bomb? Melissa asked. The most likely thing that would happen if they did that was one of the heroes was going to try and leave the fight early and slip past the person fighting below. In other words, exactly what happened when Izuku and Ochako won their fight. Only there, it started because somebody on the villain team, Bakugo, decided to wander off on his own. Here, they would be the people making the decisions. And here, it would force them into a one-on-one conflict. Melissa realized. The exact same thing that had happened in Bakugo's fight, except this time they were planning for it. And it would help her only having to focus on one person. With Volk howling at her side, she would at least be agile enough to maneuver around that person, whoever they were. There was just one issue. It would be next to impossible to know who we were fighting. We don't know which one of them would stay behind to fight you. Danielle suppressed a snort. Oh yeah, we do, she responded. There's no doubt in my mind. It's Kirishima. He's been wanting to take me on since he figured out what my powers were. Melissa paled just slightly. Sure, neither one of these people would have been a great thing for her to fight, but Todoroki showing up in front of her was definitely scarier. There was nothing she could do about it, but the more she thought about it, she really began to hate it. She shook herself off as much as she could. Hey, are you sure you're good with this? We can come up with another plan. Danielle asked. Melissa's unsure glare hardened in determination. Yeah, I'm sure. This was it. It was her first battle. Only the second time in a few days that her powers would be pushed to the limit, and she was going to give it her all, even if it broke every bone in her body. Hey everybody! As always, thanks a ton for checking out this corner of the Earth OCU universe. It was a lot of fun to write this, and I'm glad I got the time to, especially because I've been really busy lately. But, like I said in the post I made earlier, my schedule might be calming down soon, so I'm really excited about that. The fight this time felt a little on the shorter side, especially compared to the last fight, but it felt pretty accurate to where everybody was right now in terms of planning and skill level, and it gave everybody room to grow as the series goes forward. And I'm pretty happy that I got to continue everybody's personal storylines. I was really mulling over a lot in my head how much time I wanted to give everybody outside of fights, and I think I struck a good balance. A lot of personal arcs are starting here, and I'm just really excited to see where they go with you all. And genuinely, thank you guys so much for being here, it means a ton. Anyway, if you like this video, please be sure to let me know by hitting the like button, and if you like my writing or my content in general, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on this or any other series that I do in the future. Until next time, I'm your captain, and once again, it's been a pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. I'll see you all next time.